this momentarily, and then I'll walk around. And it's a pleasure to be here. This is my second time speaking at the Rotary Club, and Bob is a dear friend. We grew up together in Cambridge. Our backyards touched each other's, and we'd look out the window and we'd yell at each other, and our parents would trade food off with people. And he comes from a great family with great parents and siblings, and I talk to his family a lot, and he's a good guy. So that's why I'm here, but I'm also here because I really respect and admire the members of the Rotary Club. You guys do such great work, and you should be commended for what you do. And that's why I'm here, traveling all the way from Boston. Food was great. And it's great to have the students here. Hopefully something from what I say to you today will resonate as you go through life's journey. Because for me, and it's great to have two women, lady from England. Is it 2 or 3? Just 2, right? Yeah. 2. And so maybe we can get your opinions about what happened to me. And it all started on February 9th, 1964. And I was 7 years old. And Bobby remembers, he was younger, but I remember being 7 and what happened to me that night. And millions of other kids did too. We're called first generation Beatle fans. Even though we're only 7, it really resonated with all of us. It was February 9th, Sunday night, 8 o'clock. Kids, there was only 3 television stations and a radio. And you had to get your newspapers and magazines, and you had to wait for the news to get to you. Not like today where it travels around the world in minutes. You had to wait. But what happened that night, on Sunday night at 8 o'clock, when Ed Sullivan introduced a band called the Beatles, the news spread unlike anything else at that time. 73 million people watched. Our parents looked and shook their heads. They made us cut our hair and we would fight back. My father would, he would take me by the arm to Joe Chick's, right, Bobby? And Joe Chick would say, should we keep your sideburns? And he would shave everything else off. And we would fight to keep our hair as long as the Beatles. We had never seen anything like it before. It was always our parents' music that we were listening to. Frank Sinatra and, people like Bobby Vinton, all those crooners. But that night it changed my life. And I was very, very lucky in that I found out fairly young what I wanted to do in my life. And when I saw the Beatles, something clicked. And I was attracted to Ringo because he was up on that pedestal playing his drums, having fun. And then of course the other 3. And we had heard that this band was going to be on Ed Sullivan because the music broke a few months earlier and it was all over the radio. I wanted to be a drummer. I wanted to be Ringo. And I immediately started, we used to get coffee cans with the plastic tops and use those as drums, and we would take the sticks out of our parakeet cage and those would be the drumsticks. And I wanted to be a drummer. But I knew I really wanted to be Ringo, but I couldn't be that. I wanted to be a Beatle, well there were already 4. And so I used to carry a transistor radio with me everywhere I went, WRKO, WMEX, listening to the Beatles. They would play them over and over again. And it was a whole storm. It was this giant hurricane. Everyone at school was talking about it. It was amazing. And as the years went by, as I approached high school, I knew I couldn't be a good musician. I play the drums, but I'm not that good. I have a drum kit still in my house. It's a Ringo replica Ludwig kit that I don't play. We just look at it. And I knew I couldn't be Ringo. I knew I couldn't be a Beatle, but through listening to the radio, I would hear the DJs interviewing the Beatles. And just before I went to Ringe Tech in Cambridge, 1971, I said, I want to be a DJ so I can meet and talk to the Beatles. So all through high school, I worked at the library right next door to Ringe Tech, Cambridge Public Library, so I'd go to school during the day. I wasn't a very good student, but I'd go next door to my little job at the Cambridge Public Library and I would read books about how to be a DJ. And during the early 70s, there was a radio station in Boston called WBCN. WBCN was a groundbreaking rock and roll radio station on the FM dial. We never heard them before. It was always AM radio back then. And we heard this groundbreaking station called WBCN with the morning DJ Charles Laquadera. So I would listen every day going to Ringe Tech, Charles would play albums and play whatever he wanted. He'd say whatever he wanted, short of the 7 words that you can't say on the radio. And it was just something like I'd never heard before. So it was the mid-70s where I set my sights on working for WBCN. I said, someday I'm going to work at that station. So I graduated from Ringe Tech. I didn't do very well, but I will tell you, I wish I was there today because I would do it all differently. And in fact, side note, on November 23rd, there's the 120th alumni dinner at Ringe Tech, and they're giving me a Lifetime Achievement Award. So, but I am 58, so I guess, you know, it is a Lifetime Achievement Award, so I thank them. But I got a job at Polaroid in 1976, and some of you might remember Polaroid. If you got a job at Polaroid, you were set for life. You could have a great job, make a lot of money, and I was making a lot of money. In 1977, I was making $30,000 a year, working with chemicals that I knew nothing about. Steel-toed boots, 7 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon. So one day, at Polaroid, I'm sitting at my desk. It was about 1980. 81, I would tell you, 81. I wrote a letter to Charles Laquadera, and I said, this is who I am, this is what I do. I love the radio station, I want to be a DJ, I think you're one of the most talented guys I've ever heard. Not long after that, I mailed that letter, I got a call from Nancy Martino, who was working at the radio station, but she was also the niece of Frank Sinatra. And she called me and said, Charles got your letter, he loved your letter, would you like to come and volunteer? So I volunteered for a year in 1981, and I got hired a year later, November 22nd, 1982, and I'm still employed there today. This is my 34th year, when you count the year I worked for free. I never left. The radio station changed, BCN went away, because times change, and BCN became a sports station, because Boston is so sports crazy, and it's the station in 5 years. BCN went away in 2005, and actually a little less than that. I don't know the exact year, but it went away, and we became the sports hub, and our ratings are through the roof because people love sports. And then we bought WZLX, part of CBS Radio. But I'll backtrack a bit. When I was at BCN, everybody knew I loved the Beatles, so I was a marketing promotions person, you know, going to events, handing out t-shirts. So the program director came to me one day and said, you said you liked the Beatles. I said, I do. I collect memorabilia. I have things from 1964. He said, good, Sunday night you're going to start on the show, on the station, and you're going to have a Beatles show called Get Back to the Beatles. So that was in the late 80s, and it went for about 10 years. And it was a great show. I loved it. Every Sunday night, 6 to 8 o'clock, Get Back to the Beatles. I couldn't believe what had happened to me. So kids, it's okay if you don't know what you want to do in life up to a certain point, but if you're lucky enough to know what you want to do, because there's nothing better in life than to have a job that you love. I love going to work every day, and through my career, because I had this great Beatles show, I met Paul, had dinner with him. I've met him several times, maybe 5 times. Ringo Starr and I have become kind of friends. When you see each other, he remembers my name because he always jokes about my name being weirder than him. I wasn't born with Chachi, my name is Larry. And I got that as a radio name in 1984. And through those years of having a Beatles show, I had such great pleasure of being with George Harrison on one occasion, Ringo Starr many times, Paul McCartney. I had dinner with him in New York with John Eastman, and we all sat at a big dining room table, Lorne Michaels, Alec Baldwin, Judy Collins, Conan O'Brien, me, just crazy. And I set my sights on something. Whatever your dream is, and you've probably heard this many times, adults will say this, follow your dream, but it is true. But back in the 60s, if you remember, the world was dominated by the Beatles, and our parents were crazy, saying, what is going on here with this band? We don't like them, we don't like the hair, but the Beatles were all inclusive. They sang about love. And sooner or later, eventually, the adults were on board too. and they defied the critics, the press, saying that they were a flash in the pan. And here we are, 50 plus years later, and we're still listening to the Beatles, and they sell millions of records every year. Throughout my career, I managed to save a lot of Beatles collectibles, and I have a pretty extensive collection that's valued a lot of money. I will never sell it. I'll leave them to my wife, and we'll see what she does with them. But I brought a few items. Maybe Mr. Mangan can help me walk around and show them around. And I'll take some questions, anything about the Beatles, anything you want to talk about. Radio, sports. I don't know much about sports, but the rock radio came first for me. Okay, so we have a bunch of things. So back in the 60s, one thing that really hadn't happened was merchandising for bands. And Brian Epstein, the Beatles manager, made a deal to merchandise Beatles items. And the Beatles' names and faces were on everything. Talcum powder, shampoo. Well, let's take this one out. Be very careful. This is a very rare item, Bob. Let's walk around with this. This is a complete roll of Beatles wallpaper. It's very hard to find. They sell these pieces by the foot for hundreds and hundreds of dollars. So there's a full roll
Keith, you want this?
of Beatles. Keith loves the Beatles too, but a full roll of Beatles wallpaper.
You know how much that cost back then?
Well, back then it was very inexpensive. Today it's very expensive. Now they sell them by 1 foot pieces for a lot of money. But this is one of my prized pieces that I own. So let me ask you ladies from the UK.
Yeah.
1964, you remember the Beatles? Do you have any Beatles stories for me? Maureen Bell?
Before I became a psychologist, I was a teacher, and one of my pupils was Heather Mills, who later married Paul McCartney.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wow. And so,
That's the closest I got to them.
but did you like the Beatles when they came out?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
You did?
Yeah.
Who was your favorite Beatle?
I think probably John Lennon, because I think he was more off the wall than the rest of them, really.
He was. Now, John wasn't an angel. He had a lot of personal demons. He lost both parents at an early age. His best friend died at an early age. So he did have personal demons, but I think that added to his creativity and his ability to write and play such great songs. Did you ever meet any of the Beatles there in the UK?
No, sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
No, I was...
Margaret, tell us your story. Did you like the Beatles when they first came out?
I love the Beatles. My very first record was Twist and Shout.
Yes.
Really?
Love Me Do.
Yes.
Love Me Do was yours.
Yes.
Fantastic. And what was it like over there in the UK where they were just breaking out to being worldwide?
Oh, it was hysteria, same as it was here. It was all screaming and shouting, and I don't know how anybody could hear anything when they went to see them because they were too busy screaming.
It's true. It's amazing. It was
So it's something had never been seen before, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah.
It was the boy bands of today.
Yeah.
They were called the Beatles back then. Bobby, where's the bag?
Any questions?
Oh, sure. Amy, you have a question?
Yeah, is it Chachi?
Yes.
Well, Chachi, thanks for coming to the Woo, Worcester.
Thank you.
Chachi, I hear that Worcester is the first place that the Beatles was played on the radio. Is this true?
That is not
Down in Maine? Really?
Yeah, I heard it was Washington, D.C. But I also heard it was in...
Lies out of D.C.
Yeah. Does anybody else know about that? The Worcester was the first place the Beatles were played publicly? No?
We can find out on it.
I'd like to get back to me, Chachi.
Well, this is the thing. If you have an iPhone, somebody type it in. Where were the Beatles first played on American radio? Because you had George's sister, Louise, that lived in Benton, Illinois, I think. And she, Keith is a big Beatles fan, so he knows. So she was living in America first with her husband, and she would walk around and go to the stations around town and get them to play her brother's new band. Right, Keith?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, now if you can back me up on any of this
I
stuff.
thought it was Chicago was the first place in that area.
Okay, well it could be. Someone should be on their iPhones right now, their smartphones.
I heard it was Cambridge, Massachusetts.
It was not Cambridge, Mass. What else do we have? This is a cool item that I have. Through my years, like I said, I collected Beatles stuff. In 1964, the Beatles were on Newsweek magazine, the cover, and I kept it. I bought it. I bought two. I got one to read and one to keep. And this was the one that I got to keep. I'm holding in my hand, but I kept it with me, and when I met a Beatle, I'd bring it, and they hopefully would autograph it for me. Now, George I interviewed over the phone, but Paul and Ringo I've spent time with through the years. And here's a copy of my Newsweek magazine. It says, "Cheers to Chachi, Paul McCartney, and Ringo Starr." Wow. Autographed by the two there. There you go, Keith. You cannot have this. I'll walk this around just so you can see. Autographed to me. I got many items autographed. I got a bunch of Ringo autographs before he stopped autographing stuff. I'm going to be with Ringo in 2 weeks, October 24th at the Wang Center. We're doing a big Ringo Starr art show that we're sponsoring. And he was on my show about a month ago to talk about it. This is the Beatles on Newsweek, 1964, autographed by Ringo and Paul McCartney. This is one of my items. They put things on a Beatles name on everything. At one point, the record company, Keith, hold on to this, but don't take it. At one point, the record company made their employees come to work. Capitol Records put out a memo saying, "You must wear your Beatle wigs at work." And they made the Capitol Records label guys walk around wearing Beatle wigs. Here is an original Beatle wig that I have kept since I was a kid.
I could use that.
You probably could. This is not a wig that I'm wearing. It's the real Beatles wig that they sold in the stores. The head's still on top there. It was a crazy time back then. The world had never seen a band called the Beatles before. The music was so great. Every song was good. No one song copied another. It really was an amazing output of creativity. 414 songs from 1963 to 1970. I'm saying that wrong. 215 songs. See, I ate pasta and I get sleepy. I ate a lot of pasta. It was very good. Here's a Beatles pillow that we have from my collection. They put the Beatles on everything. And then kids, you probably don't remember vinyl records, but I loved vinyl. I have my 45s and the albums. And what's your favorite Beatle album, Maureen?
Oh, Sgt. Pepper.
Sgt. Pepper. Margaret?
A Hard Day's Night.
Hard Day's Night, I like that too. Anyone else want to say what their favorite Beatle record? For me, it was Meet the Beatles, which was with the Beatles for you guys. But Meet the Beatles, when I play that album, it takes me right back to 1964. And so we would carry around our Beatles 45s in this. And we'd go to each other's houses and we'd trade off 45s. I remember I traded a Bee Gees 45 for a Beatles 45 once. And I love the Bee Gees. 2 years ago, Barry Gibb played the Boston Garden, and we hung out with him backstage. And Barry was on stage, I have it on my phone, and I interviewed him, and I said, "My wife loves you. Stephanie, my wife, is a Bee Gees girl, I'm a Beatles guy." So I interviewed Barry Gibb. Stephanie came in on the radio show and interviewed him with me. He was so impressed, he invited us backstage at the Boston Garden. And I told him during the interview, which was a month before the concert, I said, "I always sing Run to Me to my wife. You know, now and then you need someone older because I'm 10 years older than Steph." And he remembered that, and we met backstage, said hello, and then he's on stage, and before he sings Run to Me, he says, "I want to send this out to Stephanie and Chachi, my new dear friends." And he performed Run to Me. He actually remembered that 4 weeks later, which is pretty amazing. We love the Bee Gees. The Bee Gees are great, right, Maureen?
Yeah, absolutely great.
Yeah, they went to Australia and then came back, and they're pretty awesome. Now, Bobby, don't mess up that stuff.
I wipe my fingerprints off.
So, it's been a really amazing life. I feel so blessed and so lucky that this has been my life for the last 34 years. And I'm approaching my 34th anniversary in radio. And radio's changed a lot. It's not what it used to be. You know, radio was the place to be. But now with all the other forms of communication and entertainment, with Twitter, I'm on Twitter, and with Facebook, my show's on Facebook. And you know, all that communication has kind of changed the face of radio today, but still there's thousands upon thousands and millions of people that are in their cars every day that listen and it's still a viable way of getting music out into people's hands. But certainly it's changed a lot since then. So, do we have any questions along the way? I will take some questions. Val, yes.
Are the Beatles on any postage stamps?
Not in America, but all over the world there's different postage stamps that John Lennon and the Beatles are on, but not yet in America. But my wife was at the post office the other day and got a sheet because there's a stamp that says "From me to you" on it. So I guess it's not necessarily a Beatles stamp, but it sure seems that way, doesn't it? Yes, yeah, Doctor.
For the younger folks, explain why the Beatles broke up.
The Beatles broke up because when they got together and they broke all over the world, they were in the eye of a hurricane, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, for 5 years. They toured non-stop. Before they made it big, they played over 2,000 shows in Hamburg, in Germany, all over the UK. So they were able to work on their craft. So by the time they made it big, they were so professional and so great in their music and their creativity. So they were together in hotel rooms. They couldn't be seen in public because they were mobbed. They'd create riots. 51 years ago, September 12th, in Boston, they played at the Boston Garden. You couldn't get near the garden. There were 17,000 people inside and thousands more outside. So they lived in this bubble. So you got to consider, you're with 3 other people in hotel rooms, planes, hotel rooms, concerts, hotel rooms, planes, and they would travel. They wouldn't have an 11 a.m. flight. They would travel at 3 in the morning. They landed in Boston at about 3 a.m. when they played at the Boston Garden, and there were still hundreds of kids waiting at Hanscom Air Force Base for their arrival. So there was this very close nucleus, and they had all that creativity. And as they got older, they were only in their 20s when they hit. They were like 21 years old. So, but when they put out Sgt. Pepper, Paul was 27. It's just unbelievable. It's unprecedented. So it was meant to happen that at some point they would want to do other things, get married, have kids, solo albums. They had to give up touring in 1966. They just couldn't take the non-stop touring, and they had hardly any time to themselves. When they tried to travel on vacation, they'd be identified and they'd have to leave because the press were there. They'd be snuck out in laundry bins, in the back of trucks. So it was really a hard life. It wasn't as glamorous as it might seem. I saw some hands down here.
Just a question for the kids, if they know what a 45 or LP is.
You guys know what a 45 record is, or an LP? Ah, gee whiz. Does anybody here know who the Beatles are? I mean, do you like the Beatles? Do you? Good, you do? Great.
They know what a record is.
They don't seem to know what a record is. That's the thing with iTunes. It's a vinyl record. Yeah, it spins, it does, it spins. Yes. Do you know, well, let's do the whole thing. That's a cassette tape. How about an 8-track? Do you ever have an 8-track tape? How about a reel-to-reel? CDs, those are on the way out. Isn't that amazing? I mean, now, back then, an album was a piece of art. It was a work of art. Not only the cover, but the album in its entirety. The Beatles created the concept album, which was Sgt. Pepper. They made albums in the UK, and they put them together so you'd listen to it in its entirety, which is really interesting because everybody knows Abbey Road, right? So when you play Abbey Road, when we were kids, you'd play the album, and I Want You was the last song on the first side, right? And it was 7 minutes and 27 seconds long, and the song ended just like that, and you were left to ponder it before you actually flipped the record over. You sat there and you were like, wow, that was unbelievable. Today, you play it on iTunes, it goes right into the next song. It's right there, you can listen to it alone, you can listen to it together, but most people it's like the 45 world today on iTunes. You buy a record for 99 cents, but it's a whole different thing. And it's too bad because those Beatle album covers were great. and you'd listen to the record, and you'd study the cover, and read the liner notes, and it was just a whole different thing. And then CDs, and the artwork's so small, and now there's no artwork at all. It's all on computer, you know. It's a shame, but we're so lucky to live in the time that we lived. I loved exactly where I grew up. I thought it couldn't be any more perfect.
I listened to you every Sunday night for many, many years. Whatever happened to Charles Laquadera?
Charles Laquadera is such a great guy. He is such a giving man. He retired and he's living in Hawaii. He has an internet radio show. He was the highest paid disc jockey at the radio station in the 70s and 80s. So let's see, you're living in America, you're a DJ in your late 70s and you're making $800,000 a year. What would that be today? 2.5 million. He was making tons of money because he had that kind of power. When people went out, when Charles went to an event, people showed up. Charles invested, kids, this is for you. Charles invested his money wisely. He saved, put money away every week, and he amassed a pretty nice piece of wealth. Bought 2 big houses in Hawaii, sold one to Oprah Winfrey. I'm having dinner with him on December 17th in Sudbury. He's coming in, and he retired and lives on the beach in Hawaii. Yeah. The thing about my job, I'll tell you this. There's only 2 people at the radio station that have been there as long as I. Well, me and Carter Allen. And the reason why I'm still there after 34 years, and this is the God's honest truth, I never did drugs and I never drank alcohol. I tried alcohol once, I hated it. And I never did any, like I said, never did any drugs, never drank alcohol, and I went to work, I studied at school, and I got a great job, and I'm still there after 34 years. Other DJs have gone the other way and had to leave because of this kind of lifestyle of drug abuse and alcohol. And I grew up with an alcoholic father, and I chose to never drink. Right, Bobby? You remember my father. He loved to drink. And I said, I'm never going to drink. And that's why I'm still there after 34 years. Yes.
Chachi, can you, I know this about Chachi. Could you just briefly talk about your encounter with Tony Bennett and how you met Tony Bennett?
Okay, Tony Bennett, that's a big part of my story. Back in, well, I grew up in an Italian family, and we listened to Frank Sinatra and Tony Bennett. Hey, this is Tony Bennett. That's my imitation. When I worked at WBCN, there was a guy by the name of Danny Bennett. He was a young kid, and he was managing a local band that used to play at the Channel called Tribe. You guys, some of you remember the Channel. It was a great rock club. And I remember he came to town once, and the nightclub manager said, I want you to meet the manager of this band, Tribe. His name's Danny Bennett. Okay, great. No one said who he was, or who his father was. So I met with him, and we talked about his new band, and he was the manager of the band. He was also a Beatles fan, and that's the connection we had. And so we started this friendship, and he called me one day and says, I want you to come to New York and meet my father. And I'm like, okay, who's your father? I had no idea because he was so low-key, he never said it. My father's Tony Bennett, and he's going to be on the David Letterman show, and why don't you come in and be our guest? And it was just the beginning of the resurgence of Tony's popularity with the young kids. He started to do things with MTV. He was on the MTV Awards, or the Grammys with Red Hot Chili Peppers. He started doing concerts geared to the new generation, because Danny Bennett, his son, started managing him and said, first of all, Tony's broke. We gotta prop him back up, we gotta get him out there, and we have to revitalize his career. So Danny was the genius behind it, and I was the second or third person on board, and I became friends with Tony because I was the first guy in America to play a Tony Bennett song on a rock radio station. I played Tony Bennett on WBCN. And we became friends, and that was back in the early 80s. Wow. And we are still friends today, and because of Tony, he took me to the White House. I met President Clinton, and we also went to the Super Bowl together when Tony played the Super Bowl many, many years ago. He took me to London. We did an album at Abbey Road Studios. I watched him produce an album, or record an album there. And he's become a great friend. I spent Christmas with him a few times. He's just a great man, and we're still friends today. I was just with him, with Lady Gaga at Tanglewood, and I was just showing Keith my picture of me, Tony, my wife, and Lady Gaga. And Tony is 87 years old. And here's another one, kids. He says to me, "Hey, Chooch." He calls me Chooch. Yeah, Chachi. He's 87, so. "Hey, Chooch." And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I'm going to give you the key to life." And I said, "Great, I need that." He goes, "This is what I do. I get my sleep, I drink lots of water." And that was his secret to life. You got to drink a lot of water and get your sleep. He's 87 years old. He's on tour. Keep moving. He said, "You got to keep moving." And thank you. Many, many times. He's so old school. We were in the back of a limo once. It was many years ago, and my girlfriend at the time moved on, and I was so depressed. And he says, "Hey, Chooch, don't be blue." And I'm like, "Who says that anymore? Don't be blue. There's going to be another one coming along, just like a San Francisco trolley car." And he's like, "Oh, thank you very much." But Tony and I'm lucky, God, I'm blessed to be friends with Tony. I was in his apartment, and there's an 8x10 of Frank Sinatra, and it's written, "To Tony, the best G.D. singer I know." Signed Frank Sinatra. And I said, "Well, Tony, what's GD?" And he said, "Yeah, Frank wouldn't write goddamn. He won't write that." So, but Frank Sinatra and him were best friends. And I would sit with Tony for hours and he would tell me stories about all the celebrities he's been with. And Dean Martin's my favorite. He would tell me great stories of Dean Martin. But yeah, Tony Bennett. So that was my Tony story. So I think I might have gone over my time. Any other questions? Listen, I hope you enjoyed it. And I certainly enjoyed being here. You guys do such great work. I'm in 4-H. My wife and I have a chicken club for teenagers who have chickens called the Foul Play Club. And we live in Middleborough. I have a little farm, and we have chickens and cats, no kids. And so I know the work you do is very, very important. So to everyone at the Rotary Club here in Worcester, congratulations on everything you do. And thank you, my dear friend Bob Mangan, who I grew up with. And I played in a band with his brother for years. We would wear the skinny black ties during the New Wave era. But I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope the kids take something away from this. And it was a pleasure to meet you all. So thank you.
Actually, that's a little gift for you. Thank you very much. And it says so thank you on the pen. This is the pen of distinction.
Thank you very, very much.
Photo here. All right. Okay. On 3, one more. 1, 2, 3. Great. Thank you.
Where's my Beatles stuff?
Don't forget your Beatles stuff. Yeah. Hey, Keith, could you put that back in?